Hello everybody, welcome to another video feature for DECT Today magazine and the DECT Forum YouTube channel. As you'll have seen, in recent times the big news is in the DECT world is DECT NR+, which joins the DECT family of standards and provides our entry into the world of non-cellular standalone wireless networks. To date, most of the marketing we've done has been by and for members of the DECT Forum. And the DECT community. It's been a bit inward looking. But wouldn't it be a good idea to hear the views of a professional from outside of the DECT ecosystem, somebody that really knows the IoT landscape? Well, we thought so. And so today we've invited Dr William Webb to talk DECT NR+ with some of our own experts from the forum, from Nordic Semiconductor and from Wirepass. As I'll explain in a moment, William has a breadth of experience that few people can match, including time spent as a director of Ofcom and president of the IET. He's also just written a book called The End of Telecom's History. I imagine he's going to tease out of us some new information that will be valuable to anyone and everyone looking at DECT NR+. So let's kick off by each of our speakers telling us who they are and what they do. William, how about you start first?
Thank you, Vince. So yes, as you mentioned, a long history in telecoms, about 35 years actually working in the world of telecoms in a variety of different roles. A lot of them as a consultant, but I also spent 7 years working for Ofcom, looking after spectrum and technology there, and 3 years co-founding a startup in the Internet of Things space called Newell that came up with a new technology for IoT called Weightless, which sadly didn't make it after many years of attempting to hit the big time, but a lot of valuable lessons learned from that. I've also worked for Motorola and a number of different consultancy type organizations, and now spend my time with a mix of consulting activities and, as you mentioned, trying to think a bit about the industry and overview where it's going and writing books and papers around that, and I'm looking very much forward to our discussion.
Okay, I'll go anti-clockwise here. Teppo, why don't you go next?
Sure, thanks having me, and great to be with this company to talk about NR+. So I have been in wireless and connectivity since mid-90s. So first I was in semiconductor design side, working for Nokia and then ST Microelectronics and ST Ericsson. And then when I started this journey as a CEO at Wirepass, that was a first time I really touched the IoT, so coming from mobile industry to the IoT industry. And Wirepass is an established Finnish technology company. We are a software-based company, although you can see in the background some hardware like smart meters, which is one of our key markets. So we are really specialized on this advanced wireless mesh network solutions, and I want to emphasize the word network. It's not only like point-to-point or connectivity, it's really managing the whole aspects of network. And we are already connecting millions of devices, soon about 10 million, and our focus is ultra-reliable and scalable systems, and we target for the most demanding environments, if you like. And the special thing with this is with the NR+ as well is that it's fully decentralized network protocol, and happy to talk more about it and how that also turned and is progressing as a 5G standard.
Thanks, Teppo. Larry, over to you.
Thanks for having me. I'm Lauri Piikivi, and I work as the Technical Product Manager for DECT NR+ at Nordic Semiconductors. So Nordic Semiconductors is most known for Bluetooth products, but we have cellular products, and we see this DECT NR+ now as a midway between these two extremes as a very valuable technology for IoT applications, and especially with this kind of mesh networking that handles the network expansion and load balancing and error corrections or like changes in the network by itself. And I've been working on IoT from late 90s when it was still called M2M. And I've worked with mesh protocols of different kinds and security and protocol development. And nice to be here to talk about these things.
Thank you. And Roel, our representative from the DECT Forum.
Thanks very much, Vince, and nice to be here. So yes, my name is Roel Otting. I'm employed by the DECT Forum as Business Development Director, and in that role I get to deal with a variety of different activities spanning marketing, certifications, and regulatory topics. I have a long background in business communications, going back to PBXs and unified communication, but also more than 30 years experience with DECT cordless systems at a number of companies, including Philips, Ericsson, and Ofcom. And since 3 years, I'm employed by DECT Forum and promoting our technologies.
Well, we've got quite some experience here, haven't we, guys? This should be good. William, I'm going to hand to you at this point to launch the discussion.
Thank you, Vince. So yes, I was very intrigued when I heard that there was a new standard for IoT coming out. As you heard from my history, it's something that I have attempted to do in the past. But often in the world of IoT, the challenge has actually been too many standards rather than too few. And so my first question is to try and understand how this fits in amongst the other different technologies that we have out there. So, of course, in the home and the office, a lot of things currently connect via Bluetooth or via Wi-Fi. If you go outside of the home, then there's the cellular technologies such as NB-IoT or some of the proprietary type technologies such as LoRa, WAN, those kind of activities. So my first question is, where does NR Plus sit amongst all of those? Is it a new niche, or is it sort of overlapping some of those particular areas?
Who wants to jump in there?
Yeah, I can start. So Biopass has been doing these decentralized mesh networks already for quite many years, and we were the key contributor to this new standard. So we have been in the market and the field already for some time, and our partners have done some up to 100 different use cases with this. But you are totally right. I mean, there need to be certain good markets for new technologies to make the breakthrough. And the way I see it is that it's not necessarily a question of whether it's indoor or outdoor, or whether it's like public or private per se. I would call it like local, but it can be almost any size. So I give you an example. So we are, for example, with sub-gigahertz radios already in the market for some time, and basically this NR Plus is much of the same principles what comes to the above the physical layer. And in the city of Oslo, there is 100 kilometers times 200 kilometer area where million meters are connected with this similar mesh technology. So it's still local because it's a one utility, it's a one kind of a business, but it can be spread. It can spread very broadly. And I think what the market has been lacking is a combination of very high scalability. So basically NR Plus limit is 4 billion, which comes from the address space. So I think we are all happy if we face that problem one day. And it's proven really to millions already. So that's one that is lacking from others. And then the fact that, it's very expensive to try to build the coverage indoors from the outdoors. So it's better to bring the coverage with the device itself. So if I take an example of India, where we are now very successful with this type of a mesh, is that, in India, there's about 500,000 base stations altogether as a country. But there is 320 million electricity smart meters only to be deployed. And if you use this type of a mesh, you basically have 320 million base stations instead of 500,000 base stations. So that gives you an idea why this kind of a coverage, reliability, and scale is a very unique with this technology. So that would be my kind of a, let's say, take. And there has been many other things, and quite many of those are actually designed for something else originally, and that is sometimes taking the hurdle into the IoT. We are still in the beginning, but we totally see that the fit is there. And we can talk more about what are the other use cases, but I just want to keep the kind of the positioning piece first.
Thank you.
Maybe
yeah, please.
Can I continue on that one? Sorry. So really, I think the focus here is on like business to business kind of things. So not making consumer electronics at first, but these kind of professional devices for professional use cases where the networking needs to be there to get the increasing data amounts through, that some of the older technologies that just can't support that the amount of data that needs to be collected is increasing, and there needs to be this new radio standard to support that need.
So it sounds like the differentiations are that this is a mesh technology as opposed to a centralized technology. So that obviously makes it quite different from things like NB-IoT and indeed Wi-Fi, which works off a centralized controller. But there are other mesh technologies out there as well. So Bluetooth is effectively a mesh technology, so is ZigBee. But you're differentiated from those because you're targeting more a professional kind of use case, whereas things like Bluetooth and ZigBee tend to be much more a consumer sort of in-home type of application. Would that be a fair description of kind of the niche that at the moment NR Plus is filling?
Yeah, I think that's fair from kind of a certain positioning point of view. I think then, of course, we want to see this as a most modern and latest, let's say, take on what mesh can be. And it boils down to a, let's say, very sophisticated way of locally making all those decisions, which is because it's decentralized. So TDMA, FTDMA scheme is done by the devices, within their neighbors and neighbors, how they kind of take the frequency and time domain in the control in a way that coexistence even can be managed with different networks and so forth. So those are the careabouts that those old meshes doesn't have. They are either flooding based or subnetting and so, and when you go for scale, it starts to become quite cumbersome. And what, I mean, this very well, but I mean, what the general public doesn't necessarily understand that well is that actually the maintenance piece is the most expensive piece often in IoT life cycle. And this autonomous operation of network is super important because they locally take care of forming the network, first of all, then optimizing it based on the environment, and then maintaining and dynamically adapting with frequency agile manner. Those are kind of a nonsense words for many, but then when you scale, you start to really understand the value of it. Because like in this case of Oslo, it's been there for 5 years without a hiccup, 99.99 SLA confirmed by the customer. So, and that's why this is a bit unique space, and therefore smart metering is one important street lighting type of stuff. But now also buildings are coming very strongly. And as you may know, there is a special track in CSA Matter, for example, for NR Plus now. And the building management system giants are adopting this for because this is probably the only alternative to really realistically replace wiring in building infrastructure. So logistic tracking is, I would say, the third, but that takes a little bit more time to get fully validated, and so that the kind of a return on investment to the end user is fully proven. But even Maersk is already deploying this similar type of system worldwide.
And if you just drill into that building case a bit more, so I understand that better, why would a building not go with something like Wi-Fi? What's the advantage of NR Plus over just saying, well, we've already got Wi-Fi on all our floors, we'll just camp onto that?
Well, it's a combination, in my view, of many things. It starts from the physical layer, which is probably the best choice out there when it comes from cellular type of OFDM and HARC capabilities and managing multipath, well, and so forth. And then on top of that, put this decentralized mesh, which basically gives you a lot of redundant routing options. And there you build the reliability and scale. And then again, you can do a lot of stuff with Wi-Fi, but then when you go for really long life cycle, super reliable needs, then this kick in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I let the others also.
Yes. Does anyone else want to pick up on any of those comments?
So if I can chime in there, that the issue with Wi-Fi is that Wi-Fi starts to be full. There are so many Wi-Fi base stations set up by all consumers and people, and it's really a crowded radio environment now. And with the DECT NR Plus, we can have a more controlled radio band for professional usage. And in many cases, there are situations where companies, they have policies that don't allow Wi-Fi usage just because there are mobile phones with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi causing interference. And it's really hard to build a reliable system in that kind of environment. And we see that this DECT NR Plus with the radio band that has been reserved for DECT really matches those needs that the companies now have for building reliable mesh applications in like building control and systems.
Can I add to that as well then? So yes, there are many different technologies, obviously, and every one of them has its own strengths and weaknesses. What I see here with DECT NR Plus has a number of very good features like wide range, protected frequency band, as already mentioned by Lowry, which means low risk of interference. But also, total cost of ownership of DECT systems, which the classic DECT systems had, but also the new DECT is something that is extremely important to customers. So, and then robustness and security are other features. So there are many, strong strengths with this technology. What I'm hoping will happen is that, as I say, beyond IoT, there will be other use cases. The classic DECT world finds itself in healthcare and hospitals for communication, for positioning, for mission critical messaging, for all sorts of very important things. I'm hoping, and I believe it's quite possible for DECT NR Plus to also establish itself in that market.
Yeah, that makes good sense. And I was thinking that I've looked at mesh networks on and off in the past, and the problem is often what's sometimes called seeding the mesh, that mesh networks are great when you've got lots of nodes out there, because when you drop another one in, it can always find something to talk to. But if you've got a very sparse set of nodes, and then you put another one in, it may be too far out of range. But actually, the applications that you've talked about collectively, essentially there's a sort of centralized control. So with smart metering, you can make sure that you roll out in a way that you don't end up with isolated individual nodes that can't connect with anything else. You effectively start from one point and roll outwards so that you can always build connectivity. Within a building, be it a commercial building or a hospital, again, you can effectively make sure that you've got enough node points in there to provide the start of the mesh and then build collectively from that. So that does seem to make a lot of sense to target those areas where there's a high density of use, but equally a need for certainty of connectivity, and hence that plays strongly into the spectrum that you've got allocated there that is essentially dedicated pretty much to this and other DECT applications, but can be managed through the DECT systems. And I'm guessing that spectrum is relatively underused at the moment. Would that be fair?
Yeah, it's still quite quiet, and yeah. That's a huge value, to be honest. If you take that bandwidth of 20 or 40 megahertz, depending where you are in the world, and see what are paid for such amount of bandwidth for other purposes, it's pretty awesome. But that's very good point. So I mean, on one hand, mesh needs certain density to work well. But now we have introduced a totally new physical layer, which, line of sight can take up to 10 kilometers when you really push with the full output power and all those parameters, all those technologies that this physical layer has, which is really amazing. But on the other hand, this enables densities that nothing else enables. So I mean high densities. And because there's an automatic output power adjustments, for example. So if you use frequency A, you can reuse frequency A nearby again, when it's not interfering with itself and it's fully automatic. And I would use a little bit similar analogy that was on a mobile versus Wi-Fi a few years ago. When Wi-Fi started to become more popular in super malls or cafeterias and so forth, the operators were a little bit kind of pushing back that, hey, this is our lunch. Don't come here. We want to own the data. But what happened was, thanks to the smartphones, that the amount of data exploded, and actually it saved the operators, because otherwise they would have been able to keep their services. And I see a little bit similar analogy here that cellular is great for certain IoT applications, especially M2M and like fleet management, if you follow trucks, for example. But then when you go to the next level, what's inside the truck, then it makes a lot of more sense to mesh it the next kind of a last mile. And I think can become also as a public network someday, but at least it gets started more like a private and local. But technology itself can be used obviously anywhere. So let's see if this convergence happens along the 5G standardization, where the better kind of because they are quite symbiotic, cellular and this one. I don't see them competing, to be honest.
So what I'd like to do now is just talk a bit about how you get to mass market. And it's a subject close to my heart because that's essentially where I failed when I was working with the startup that I co-founded. We had a great technology and plenty of potential applications, but we failed to get sort of over the threshold of the point where there was enough demand that it would stimulate widespread production of a range of different chipsets and kind of become self-sustaining. And that feels to me quite a challenge now. You've already got a chipset solution, which is great. That's often a key difficult hurdle. But how do you get to the point where, I guess, almost every smart metering deployment is considering using NR+, where hospitals look at it as one of the primary kind of technologies they're at? How do you make sure that all those different entities know about it and rate it highly enough to think about deploying it?
Yeah, maybe.
Should we start?
Yeah,
should we start with the basics? Just that. Okay, we focus on our strengths. So we as Nordic, we have made the PHY and the chipset, which is our core focus and core technology expertise. And Wirepass has a long-standing meshing stack that has been proven on many technologies. So we have combined expertise on our offering, which is now starting to roll out. So of course we are now looking for the first success cases, which will then be publicized and to get the ball rolling forwards, and that's it. Let's hope it happens.
Yeah,
probably wants to add.
From the DECT Forum perspective, so like I mentioned, one of our roles is marketing, our technologies. And since Wirepass and Nordic joined the DECT Forum about 2 years ago, we've been very active in this area. For example, with a number, series of webinars, but also presentations at other events, and indeed we also have our own event every year where we've promoted NR+. So marketing, but our budget is of course quite limited and probably not enough to make this happen. But what I do think at this stage, there's a very high expectation because the standards is in place and has been worked on, I think, since 2017 and is now mature. We also have chipsets available. I think the next step, people are really waiting for the next step to see the products, to see them out in the market, to see successful customer cases and evidence, if you like, of the technology. And I think we're very close to that point. And once we have that, I think we'll see a very, fast pickup.
Yeah, of course, the foundations, like Lauri also said, need to be very solid and competitive. But I'm not a great believer that there would be a technology that really do IoT overall. It's so diversified, it's so fragmented that and any technology like Bluetooth, it was first for the accessories, like very clear kind of a target. Then Wi-Fi for the local data. But over time, they have been, then taken to adjacent businesses as well. And I think the same happens here. So we need to identify, as we have identified, those use cases that really makes the most sense to get started. And smart metering, smart buildings. And I don't mean like smart homes necessarily. We are more on the infrastructure side. And then we double down those, and then we build the ecosystem within those and make them working well. And then, anything can happen in the long play, but we cannot think of that this adoption happens all over the world for all the use cases. And that's very important, because then we can focus our investments, focus our impact making and ecosystem build up, partnering programs. And what I'm so excited to see, for example, the building side, that the big building management system giants as competitors to each other are finding each other around this topic. And that to me is a big signal that, we are offering something that resonates and can really make an ecosystem. But it's not fast in IoT, that's for sure.
No, and I think that's something that we've all learned over the years, is that the world of IoT doesn't move that quickly. And on the plus side, it does keep moving and it does keep growing. And if you look at all of the data that's out there, year after year after year, there are more connected devices, but it's not the kind of explosive growth that some people like myself and others had hoped for back then. It's a steady growth, but that does mean that you don't need to be there at the start. You can effectively come in at any time. But yes, I agree. I think picking a few use cases and effectively showing strengths in those is much better than saying we can do everything and then effectively not having any focus. And it does feel like smart metering is a good place, because there's only a small number of electricity networks in the world, and you can effectively target each one of them. It's tractable, or at least a fraction of them.
And now we enable mesh in Europe. That's a very important thing, because the sub-gigahertz regulation hasn't been really favoring mesh, other than in Nordic countries where it's a little bit different.
Well, gentlemen, I'm going to have to jump in here, because before long we're going to run out of time. So I think perhaps we maybe need to do part 2 to this discussion, because it feels like it could go on and on. But I'm going to throw it back at William just for a moment and say, based on your experience, William, and what you've been through, what's the single most important element that the DECT Forum and NR Plus has to get right?
Yeah, I think it's probably the marketing in broad terms. The technology, I think, is almost taken for granted. I'm a technologist. I know it's not easy, but the assumption, I think, is always that everyone can make that work. But it feels like you've got an important message, a message that's a bit different from other technologies. That's a mix of the well-established framework of DECT, the spectrum that's dedicated, which is critical, and a particular focus area. And it's getting that message out there in a very clear, crisp way. So rather than just saying, hey, this is great new technology, NR Plus, isn't it wonderful? To actually kind of say, we've got this solution, it does this and this and this really well, and to push into that area. And then, as Teppo and others have said, over time, that can then expand. Of course, other people can find other applications. You don't have to rule out other things, but it feels like that kind of sharp focus on this is what it can really do, and picking perhaps a few key markets to build some great case studies that can then expand outwards feels like, to me, the key thing that's needed at this point in time.
Well, thanks for that, and I'll take this opportunity to encourage us to elegantly wrap up here now rather than be chopped off. Thank you all for your time today. I think we should have a discussion in the background about whether we do this again to extend. But thank you all very much indeed for your contributions today, and to our readers, we hope you've enjoyed this chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.